Welcome to Stories with Traction, unedited and unfiltered. These are real conversations with leaders who have walked through trials and triumph. In a world of AI-polished sound bites and scripted perfection, this podcast isn't about being flawless. It's about being purposeful. I'm your host, Matt Zahn. We're going to find out what drives these leaders, what's their story, and how can we learn from their experiences. Get inspired and enjoy Stories with Traction. Morgan, welcome to the Stories with Traction podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thanks for being here. This conversation is a little ironic because I am currently sleep deprived right now, and I'm having a sleep and insomnia coach on. So thank you for being here.
You're
We
welcome.
can dissect my problems later on in this episode. But I want to start with some of the things that you currently do for your clients. So when you meet with someone that is having trouble, whether it be with insomnia or their willingness to understand the importance of sleep, what are some of the things that you do to help them navigate that terrain?
Yeah. So it all starts with a consultation because I meet with everybody who works with me before we get started to see if there's a fit, to see if there's a mutual fit, and also to make sure that I'm screening them appropriately because there are like 80 different sleep disorders. And I'm only trained to work with insomnia. So I need to make sure that they don't have a sleep disorder that I don't address. And if they do, then I refer them to the appropriate practitioner. But assuming we meet, we have a consultation and they're the right fit, they're either having insomnia or they just want to optimize their sleep. Sometimes people come to me and they're like so-so sleepers, but they want to like really up their game. So what we basically have, I basically work with sort of three different buckets, or I call it the trifecta. So the methodologies I use are number one, rooted in CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And there's a lot to touch on that. But in a nutshell, CBTI is helping people change their behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs around sleep using a non-pharmacological approach. It's actually been shown to be more effective than sleeping pills with no side effects. So that's wonderful. And then the second way I help people is really through circadian rhythm optimization. And we can touch on that briefly if you'd like. And then finally, the last piece of that is mindfulness. So that's kind of how I work. Those are the main components that I work with. We also touch on things depending on the client's level of doing this, but like nutrition, movement, because a lot of clients who come to me, they're already really health conscious and they already have like a super dialed in diet and they're really in shape. They're very fit. Then some people don't. So we need to kind of work on things from all ends. So, and in some ways, I really consider myself a holistic sleep coach because I'm looking at so many various different aspects of my client's life.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack with what you said.
There is.
So when someone says the word insomnia, I feel like that word paints pictures in people's minds. And I firmly believe there's going to be a ton of people listening to this episode and they're going to have different pictures. So can you paint the picture for us and give us your definition or maybe the clinical definition of what insomnia actually is?
Yeah, let's go with the clinical definition. So insomnia is having trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up too early, and also feeling unsatisfied with your sleep at least 3 nights a week for 3 months or more to be considered chronic insomnia. Now, there's something called acute insomnia, which is basically the same criteria, but for less than 3 months. And the given person going through life is probably going to have one episode of acute insomnia during their life. Those tend to be kind of predicated by like a death or a divorce or a job loss or, a health diagnosis. But chronic is really where, people are typically seeking out help over 3 months. I've worked with women who unfortunately have had insomnia for 20 years. So I don't recommend that people let the insomnia go on for that long. So nipping it in the bud before it becomes chronic is actually a really good idea because people get into they get into habits that perpetuate their insomnia, ironically. So yeah, that's basically the definition of insomnia from the clinical side.
All right. So when you first started sharing the definition, I'm chuckling because you're saying
Yeah.
3 nights a week for 3 months. And I'm immediately thinking, that's me. That
Yeah.
is me. So it's interesting. And I'm just speaking for me personally. I think this might help people listening. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that could relate to this. I don't have trouble falling asleep. I could fall asleep within 10 minutes. I have difficulty staying asleep. I'll wake up at 3 a.m. almost every morning. Sometimes I can get back to sleep, sometimes I cannot. So what version of insomnia would that be? Is there a certain definition for someone that it just wakes up in the middle of the night and can't fall back to sleep?
Yeah, technically that's called sleep maintenance insomnia. And honestly, that is like the most common sleep problem that I come across. Most of my clients don't have a ton of trouble falling asleep. But the staying asleep is really a beast. It is, and it's through all, ages, genders, socioeconomic. It's very, very prevalent. So it's the most common that I see.
Wow. All right. So we'll talk a little bit more about my troubles a little bit
Yeah.
later in this conversation, but I do want to talk and I want to touch on the behaviors. You mentioned behaviors towards sleep. Is this like the mindset on how people view sleep, or what do you mean by
Well,
behaviors towards
behave.
sleep?
Okay. So some of the behaviors that actually perpetuate insomnia seem a little counterintuitive. So I'll give you an example. Someone who has insomnia may go to bed super early because they want to increase their chances of having sleep, of actually sleeping. So an example might be someone goes to bed at 9 because they feel like, quote, they should. I might catch some sleep. Well, one of the issues is that they're not actually sleepy at 9 o'clock. So they go to bed at 9 o'clock and they're still kind of awake and alert and not ready for sleep. So what happens is they lie there tossing and turning for a couple of hours, which just perpetuates that insomnia. On the other end is when people have insomnia, they will often um, hit the snooze button quite often in the morning and repeatedly, hit it. And then what's happening is in that time period that the snooze button is going off, they're not having restorative sleep. It's just this really light, fragmented sleep. And then, I mean, there's so many behaviors, but like another behavior is using caffeine throughout the whole day, not just like your regular 1 to 2 cups of coffee in the morning, but like literally relying on that to hold themselves together all day. So really by the time they go to sleep, they're still kind of wired from the caffeine and hence the cycle continues. Or one more example and I'll stop, but alcohol. A lot of people are using alcohol as a sleep aid. So they are like, okay, I'm wired. I'm like wired and tired. I'm going to have some alcohol, in the evening to wind me down. And they fall asleep and they end up having worse sleep quality and so then they rely on the caffeine, and then that's a whole cycle. So there are lots of sneaky little behaviors that creep up on us when we have insomnia. And that's why, like, working with somebody like a coach is good because I typically have people track their behaviors on a spreadsheet. And so what we can do is we can look at the behaviors and look at their sleep and really, really dissect, okay, this behavior didn't do so well for your sleep. But on the other hand, this one actually seemed to be pretty sleep promoting.
Yeah, so you mentioned so many things that are just gold. So, all right, so let's touch on the alcohol piece. So, for me personally, at the time of this recording, I'm 170 days with no alcohol.
Wow.
It's been a game changer, right?
Congrats. It's
Yeah,
huge.
it has been an absolute game changer. Now, what's interesting for me on how it changed for me is I injured my lower back a couple of years ago, and to overcompensate for the pain, I started walking funny because I was like shifting because it hurt when I walked, it hurt when I sat, it hurt when I sat, like everything I did, it hurt. So I started shifting my body, and the pain started transferred to my left hip. Well, I sleep on my side. And what I noticed was, especially when I would drink in the evening, in the middle of the night, my inflammation in my left hip like shot up in the middle of the night and it kept me up because of the pain. So I'd roll over, I'd take, ibuprofen or whatever, which is not good to take every single night. And I know that. So nixing the alcohol really my inflammation plummeted. So
Yeah.
that was helpful.
Mm.
I'm still trying to tackle the caffeine piece. So today I've had two energy drinks and I had a tonic and espresso, which is one of my favorite like coffee-ish drinks. Highly recommend it if you're a coffee drinker.
Interesting.
Yeah,
That's new
absolutely
to
love it.
me.
Yeah, I've there's a local coffee shop right down the street from me. They do a tonic and espresso. So I stopped caffeine around 11 a.m. and I'm going to try to go to bed around 10 p.m. tonight. So did I cut off caffeine in enough time for it not to still be in my body?
That's a good question. And it's kind of a hard one to answer because it depends on your body's ability to clear caffeine. So there's a specific gene in our body which is escaping me, but it determines how fast you clear caffeine. So some people are slow metabolizers, some are fast. So you could, maybe if you've had 23andMe done, you can look in to see if you have that gene. The way that I approach caffeine is I sort of go on the assumption that somebody is a slower clearer of caffeine. And so I'm a little bit more conservative in my recommendations on when to cut it off. So in general, I'm sort of saying to people, cut your caffeine off around midday, 12 o'clock, ish would be probably a good time. But, I'd also want to know like how many grams of caffeine your energy drinks and your espresso tonic, which sounds amazing, have in them. But there's an app that I recently learned about. You may want to try for grins. It's called High Coffee. High, like high coffee. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. And inside of it, you can log the different drinks you have, the time that you want to go to bed, and it'll give you more of like an estimation of like, are you cleared? Again, it doesn't know your genetics, but it's, something better than nothing. Um, so yeah, that would be sort of my guidance to you on caffeine consumption.
I'm already looking at the app right now and
Was
I'm
I right?
downloading High Coffee, caffeine
Okay,
tracker. Yeah.
for a second I was going to say high caffeine, but that doesn't make sense. So okay, I'm glad you found it.
Interesting. All right. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate the behavior piece. How about the circadian rhythm? All right. So circadian rhythm for someone that wakes up, because you had mentioned that a lot of people struggle with this. For people that do wake up in the wee hours of the morning and they want to get up, right? Like, so I want to be doing, I want to be achieving, I want to be knocking goals off my to-do list, right? So when I wake up and I have difficulty getting back to sleep, like I want to get up. I want to start working. Obviously, that's going to throw off my circadian rhythm, correct?
Correct. Yeah. This is something that I see with a lot of high achieving people like you. I mean, it's so predominant. They like, for example, they wake up at 4 and their normal wake up time would be 6, but they're like up 2 hours early and they stew in bed and they go, I might as well just get up and start working. So they get up, fire on their computer, turn on the coffee, and their brain gets stimulated by all of this, the lights, the coffee, the working. And essentially what is happening is you're sort of training your body and brain to continue to wake up early because your body is so smart. It starts to pick up on these cues. And so you're more likely to have those wake ups more consistently if you're telling your body, hey, it's time to work. So as hard as it is for the high achiever out there, what I really recommend is not starting your workday before it's supposed to begin, despite how much you may want to.
That's a really good point. So
Yeah.
I wanna talk about, so you mentioned an app already. I want to talk about maybe some other quick things, not that there's a silver bullet, but quick things people could do to have a positive effect on their sleep. So one in particular that I'm thinking of, I don't know what your thoughts are on this. That's why I'm bringing it up. I
Yeah.
just started this 3 weeks ago. It has helped, like a noticeable difference. The intake strips, so the magnets on my nose, so it's making my nostrils a little bit bigger, and I legitimately feel more oxygen to my brain. So even if I get not ideal sleep, I'm not waking up as groggy. I'm not waking up as there's sometimes like I feel almost like a tired headache, which I haven't felt that in the last
Mhm.
3 weeks, regardless of the amount of sleep that I'm getting. So anything that you would recommend like that? Any tricks, if you will, or any not gizmo, well,
Yeah.
maybe gizmos, but anything that you'd
Well,
recommend, like if you do this, you will see an
yeah.
immediate improvement.
So I've got three recommendations and none of them are gizmos. Not to knock gizmos, but I really, really like to start with things that are accessible to everyone that you don't necessarily have to go out and buy. So number one, and I'm really fascinated by that thing you just described because I've heard of people doing it. I've never had a client tell me about doing it. But it totally makes sense because we want to breathe through our nose. And a lot of people are using mouth tape, and in the beginning of my career, I was like telling everyone about mouth tape. And I shouldn't have been, honestly, because what they've discovered recently is that for people who have untreated sleep apnea, the mouth tape can actually hurt you because if you can't breathe through your nose and you've shut off your mouth, what are you going to do? So, I'm a big proponent of people getting their sleep breathing tested, especially once they hit, 40, 50, would be a good benchmark. And it's super easy to do now because since COVID happened, they have figured out a way to home test people because during COVID, all the, sleep labs were closed. So they started shipping out the sleep studies to people. So, just as a side note, I don't work with people with sleep apnea. I have coaches in my, periphery who I could help you get connected to, but sleep apnea is a huge, huge issue, and I won't tangent anymore. But like maybe that's a separate podcast for you. Okay, so my three things. Okay, so number one is to get morning sunlight as soon as you can when you wake up, and this goes back to circadian rhythm. This really strengthens your circadian rhythm and tells your body and brain, hey, the morning has started. We're going to begin these processes that are supposed to be done during the day. Now, we often talk about the sunrise, and that's a really important time to get out and be exposed to the natural light. You want to remember not to wear your sunglasses during this time because the sunglasses block that light from hitting your retina. So how it works is the light hits your retina, that sends a signal to your suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is your circadian pacemaker. And from there, there's this beautiful cascade of neurotransmitters and hormones that happen. So your cortisol gets boosted in a good way. Any type of melatonin that's residual from the night before gets shut down. And then this is something that a lot of people haven't talked about yet, but I like to bring this up because not everybody can get out at sunrise. So right after sunrise, there's a period called UVA rise. And that is when the sun is at a 10 to 30 degree angle above the horizon. And it's typically it depends on the season, but it usually lasts for an hour or so in the morning. So where I live here in Virginia, I have an app that tells me it's happening from like 7:30 to like quarter of nine, maybe. And during that period of time is really important because when the light hits your eyes, you have these amino acids that get converted into neurotransmitters. So it gets so tryptophan, tyrosine get converted to serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine, which are your motivation and happiness neurotransmitters. It also helps regulate thyroid hormone and appetite regulation. So this is a really prime time for people to get out as well if they can't make it for sunrise, because not everyone is an early bird. So you do have the chance to get that beautiful morning sunlight if you sleep in past the sunrise. My second tip is to anchor your wake up time and have a wake up time that you can reasonably stick to every day that ends in day, which is 7 days a week. So you're looking at probably about a half hour of variation. So keeping that regularity is important to keep your circadian rhythm really, really robust. And there has been a lot more research in the past couple of years pointing to the fact that we need sleep consistency, sleep wake consistency for health. So for so many years, we've been told that, okay, everyone needs 8 hours of sleep. And that's actually a myth. Not everyone needs 8 hours. What's really more important than the number of hours logged is the consistency of our sleep wake cycle. So what typically happens in a lot of my client scenarios is that somebody's waking up at 6 a.m. Monday through Friday. And then on the weekend, they sleep in till 9. So that's a 3 hour gap. And that's a 3 hour differential. And what can typically happen there is you're giving yourself social jet lag if you're doing that on the weekend for like 2 days straight. So Sunday nights are really difficult. And then Monday mornings are a real drag. That's personally my theory on why people hate Mondays is because they're suffering from social jet lag from their inconsistent sleep wake cycles. And then the third tip, this is often free, not always simple, but it's exercise. And so exercise helps with sleep because it helps, again, our circadian rhythm. It helps boost our sleep drive and it helps lower cortisol. So there have been multiple studies showing that sleep helps with sleep depth, especially as you get older, helps with quality, time to fall asleep. So, and you don't have to go hard. This is like 30 minutes of moderate exercise, maybe 4 days a week would be sufficient for most people. So those are all, and notice that all of those things that I mentioned all relate back to the circadian rhythm. So when we're first starting out on our journey to get better sleep, I'm always looking at the circadian rhythm because good sleep is actually an output of a strong circadian rhythm. So it's not necessarily start with a supplement. Like I don't really start with the gadgets and supplements. I typically will add those later on because I want to dial in on the really basic things that people have access to.
Wow. All right. There's so
I
many
know
things that you
that
said
was
that
long-winded. I
no, that
apologize.
was awesome. So there were so many things that you said I've never heard of before.
Yeah.
Social jet lag, UVA rise, right? All these different things. So
Yeah.
I want to break a few of these things down. So morning sunlight, any recommendations on timing? So everyone is pressed for time. So I'm trying to think of this from a practical perspective. I
Sure.
wake up in the morning,
Yeah.
I go out, I'm on my porch, or I go into my so where the sun is, where it rises, where I am, I'd go on to my front porch and then into my front yard. Am I there for 10 minutes, 15, 20
Yeah.
minutes? What's an optimal time to be in this sunlight?
Yeah. Great question. I would say probably, I mean, as long as you have the ability to do it. Like if you've only got 5 minutes, stay 5 minutes. I aim for 10 minutes in the morning. I actually take my dogs for a walk around the neighborhood for 10 minutes shortly after sunrise. Um, the main thing is you don't want to wear your sunglasses. I see multiple people in my neighborhood wearing sunglasses, even when it's cloudy. And you're doing yourself a disservice by wearing the sunglasses. Now, if you are driving into work and there's a glare, by all means, put on your sunglasses for the benefit of safety. But just walking around your neighborhood, you don't really need those. Um, so timing, yeah, 10 minutes more is better, but don't like let perfect be the enemy of good in that scenario. Um, One other trick that you could practice is on your way into work, you can actually crack your window because that actually lets because the not light particles, I guess they bend. So you're getting some of that benefit with a cracked window. Even a screened in porch will help. So that's sort of,
Interesting.
yeah, that's sort of the guideline on light.
So you mentioned anchor wake up time, which I'm guessing would mean trying to wake up the same time every single day, regardless of if it's the weekend. Would you anchor your sunlight time? Meaning, if you say 10 minutes, are you is it bad if you get like 15 minutes one day and 2 minutes the next day? Like, should you be anchoring that 10 minutes, or it's just whatever you can get on that particular day?
Whatever you can get in. I mean, my guidance is get as much as you can every day, but it doesn't have to be like the consistent amount every day because every day can be different for people, and we have different things that come up that are unexpected, and we have to like adjust. So I really just do what you can, um, just do your best. So, and in addition to the morning sunlight, I'm also a big proponent of people getting outside for like small light, like call them light snacks during the day, because actually our melatonin is produced in, we have intracellular melatonin that gets boosted by daylight. So that's more of the mitochondria that's anti-cancer, um, anti-inflammatory. So aiming for this can be a stretch, but like I don't come close to this every day, but like getting like 90, like 60 minutes of sun exposure a day, be it from like sunrise to sunset, because the rays that are happening around sunset are tend to be the red kind of orange hues, and those are very calming for your nervous system. So like all the light is beneficial. So, the way that I kind of do this in my own life, and I'm an entrepreneur, I work from home, like a lot of your um, audience probably does, is I just look at my calendar during the day and where can I take 10 minutes and walk? And I can probably log in about 50 minutes during the day. And I also will take my lunch outside. I'll just like my lunch, put out a lawn chair and sit there, and that counts as my light. So I'm just really strategic about it. Because we are typically, most of us are inside too much.
Understood. For
Yeah.
sure. So you also mentioned exercise. Is there a benefit, let's say running, walking or running versus lifting weights, or is it just exercise in general? That's a
It, it
positive.
it all counts. My guidance would be, try to make it moderate. Sometimes I'll have clients say, "Well, I got my exercise today." I'm like, "Oh, great. What did you do?" And they've counted their exercise as like a casual dog walk. And that's awesome, like, to be congratulated for, because they're getting their sunlight and their movement and their steps. But that's not really considered, quote, exercise in that way of it's not really doing that much to boost your sleep drive because it's not intense enough. There have been some recent studies, though, showing that people who are older, like 60 plus, may have more benefits from strength training as their activity of choice. But I don't really like to split hairs on this because movement is movement, like exercise is exercise. So whatever, floats your boat, like go ahead and do that. I personally like to do kind of a split of cardio and strength work just for my own, I find it to be a balanced kind of workout plan. But, you know, walking, running, lifting, tennis, spinning class, whatever. It's all good.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. So you also talked or you touched on mindfulness, and I feel like that word is thrown around a lot. How do you mean in regard to sleep? Like, what would mindfulness be pertaining to sleep?
Yeah.
Is there not it's not the attitude towards it, right?
It can be, yeah. It can mean a lot of different things. In the work that I do, quite often we're looking at shifting someone's sleep mindset. So, for example, someone may come to me and they have this like kind of story that they've told themselves their whole lives, often predicated on what they were told as a child. Susie's a terrible sleeper. Matt's just not a good sleeper, and so sometimes those labels stick with us. And when we have struggles with our sleep, we lean in on that. And so I like to help people kind of like change their story about sleep. So if you are like, I had a client the other day or the other month, she used a bad word about her sleep a lot. I won't say it because this may be a clean podcast, but she would like use expletives about her sleep. And I just stopped her and I said, well, how did you just take a moment and like think about how you just described your sleep? And she's like, yeah, that was really inflammatory, wasn't it? And what I was trying to get her to do was to not become like Susie Sunshine and go like, I'm the best sleeper ever. Cause like that's false positivity. Like we don't want to go in that direction. But like let's meet in the realm of neutrality about our sleep. So something neutral might be, I'm having struggles with my sleep right now, but I'm doing X, Y, and Z to help regulate it and bring it back because I'm confident I can get good sleep again. That's a lot more positive. So that's just like one example of how we're changing mindset. Sometimes people like to do things like meditation. Meditation can be good for some people. Some people, really balk at it, and I don't force that on anybody, but I offer it as a tool because some people have never really experienced it, and I think it's a good thing for most people to at least delve into and dabble around in to see if it's working for them. So yeah, many mindset things
Well, I
out
appreciate you
there.
mentioning the story dynamic. It's interesting. So in my early 20s, I kid you not, I had a sales manager tell me I'll sleep when I'm dead, would
Ah,
always belittle sleep. The individuals on the team would literally brag about the lack of sleep they were getting because they were focused on selling or reading sales books. And that was the culture that was created, that sleep deprivation was a badge of honor. So it's interesting how some people view sleep from a story perspective. So speaking of story, I do want to share different things with you regarding myself personally, and maybe you can walk me through what I'm doing right, room for improvement as well, and we can kind of just you can talk me through process through how I can make this better. I think this is going to be super helpful to people listening because I know that I'm not the only one in the world that deals with this. Okay,
Sure.
so last night I had a late meeting. I had a meeting that went from 9 p.m. to it wrapped up around 10:30 p.m. And then by the time I let my dog out and I, got my normal bedtime routine, I end up getting into bed around 10 p.m. I wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning and I cannot get back to sleep. My mind is racing. I'm actually really frustrated about something in my life right now. So I keep thinking about it and thinking about it. And then I lay there and lay there. And then I'm checking my phone and it's 4 a.m. and then 5 a.m. And I'm thinking I might as well just get up. So I get up at 5 a.m. I start my morning routine. So basically 4 hours of sleep. It's not no sleep, but I would love to get 7 hours of sleep and just that threw my day off. I had an incredibly important meeting earlier in the morning. This is a meeting that I had been anticipating now. I think we scheduled this meeting in July. Like this is a meeting like that was incredibly important. I'm fumbling and bumbling through it, right? Because I'm sleep deprived. My caffeine hasn't kicked in to the fullest extent yet. So it wasn't my best work. And I know that, and I'm frustrated. So if someone wakes up at 3 a.m. and they're thinking about something, whether it's a work project or whether it is maybe a family situation or whatever is causing their mind to race, is there anything that you would recommend to turn the mind off?
Yeah, it's such an incredibly common issue. So I think kind of going through your scenario, thank you for like that transparency about what was going on. I think the number one, well, there are a few things, but really like the low-hanging fruit, and this is hard for a lot of people, is like do not check the time when you wake up in the middle of the night. Like don't even have your phone in your bedroom. It's like, because it's so tempting. Like I usually have people put their phone in the next room so that if they have an alarm on their phone, they hear it. But just seeing the time, Matt, is so triggering because you end up doing this mental math countdown and it just makes you more and more frustrated. The more times you check your clock, you're like, oh my God, now I've got 3 hours. Now I've got two. It's just like, it makes like your life miserable. Like, and I've done this before and it was like, never again. So that would be like really the first thing that I would say is just nix the clock watching. Um, it sounds like when you had your meeting, it sounds like you went, and correct me if I'm wrong, you might have gone just right from your meeting to bed.
There was a
Yeah.
little bit of a night routine, brushing
Okay.
teeth, doing those, making sure the dishwasher was set. So there
Okay.
were different things I do before I go to sleep. So it
Right.
took me about maybe 20, 30 minutes until
Yeah.
my body was physically under the sheets.
Yeah, I think what I would recommend in that scenario, if you're working that late, giving yourself a little bit of a longer time to actually wind down. So, like you're doing those things that you need to do, but I would probably do a brain dump like right after your meeting. It's just like, and make sure the whole time, like you're doing things late at night, making sure that your light is dim because the any kind of bright light is going to activate your body and like reduce your melatonin. So keeping your surroundings as dark as humanly possible without, risking safety is really good at night. But like taking, 10, 15 minutes to kind of decompress and like let your mind kind of wind down, like do the brain dump, kind of like you mentioned something was bothering you, write about that. Um, Maybe doing some breath work or like a short meditation to just kind of like get things calm, I think is a great way to like um, decompress, get your brain in a little bit less of an active state before bed. Because it sounds like you just kind of went from one thing to another without like that kind of like buffer. Um, and then when you wake up at 3 a.m., I have actually written a complete free guide on this. It's called Awake Again at 3 a.m., your guide to why you're waking up and what to do about it. And I know that you downloaded it because you showed it to me earlier. But it's a great guide because it gives some strategies on why we're waking up. And I think, you know, we kind of know why you were waking up. It's probably you had unresolved things that were going on and your brain was still processing them during sleep. Um, but really, like, it's just very wild how our brains work at midnight. There's something called mind after midnight. And they've done these studies showing that we have more catastrophic thoughts when we wake up in the middle of the night. So like when you wake up at that time, reminding yourself that like brain, like I sometimes tell people, talk to yourself in third person, like Matt, your brain right now isn't like firing on all cylinders. And the things that you worry about, you need to kind of remind yourself that they're not solvable problems at 3 in the morning. And that, I have a practice that I recommend for people is um, it's a brain dump. It's called constructive worry. It's like a whole, practice for people to do. Like usually after dinner is just writing their problems down and then writing down the next possible solution. So if you make that a practice like every evening, it's actually training your brain to work out the problems during the daylight hours versus night. So if you establish that practice, what you can tell yourself at 3 in the morning is, I've done my worry time for the day. I'll resume it tomorrow because literally nothing can be done about these problems at this time of night. When people become very agitated in bed at 3 a.m., another strategy that I recommend is something called stimulus control. And that's coming from the CBTI that I mentioned earlier. And it's basically removing yourself from a scenario, AKA your bedroom, that's stressing you out. So it's getting out of bed, going to another room and doing something like calm and relaxing in dim light until you feel like you're a little bit more calm and you're ready to go back into bed. So we don't want you to be in a scenario where you're like tossing and turning in bed. So that's a lot, but that's
What
kind
time
of,
do you recommend the worrying? So if I were like I'm envisioning like a shelf, like I'm putting a can on the shelf, almost like I'm gonna pull the can off and that's the worry, and then I'm gonna put it back on the shelf when I go to sleep. What time would I, whether it's journaling, jotting, like whatever the case may be, what would be the best worry time that wouldn't throw off a circadian rhythm?
yeah. So the best time is a few hours before bed. You want to leave a little bit of buffer room between bed and this activity. Most of my clients tend to do this after dinner because you're probably familiar with the habit stacking type of
Yes.
concept. So essentially, it's a new habit for you. So it's stacking, finishing dinner, getting the dishes put away. Once I do the dishes, put them away, I do my constructive brain, constructive worry exercise. So then you've got this kind of prompt that's built in. So that tends to be the best time of night for most of my clients to do this.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning the habit stacking. So it's funny you mentioned that. So Atomic Habits by James Clear, that's the book that I've read multiple times this year that talks about the habit. I highly recommend anyone
It's
listening that
great.
has not read Atomic Habits, highly recommend it. So I know this is going to sound super fundamental, but I'm just trying to think of this practically in my own life. So when you say the phone in another room, are you insinuating that I should be purchasing like an old school alarm clock and using that to wake up? And if so, how do I keep myself from glancing at the time on that alarm clock?
Yeah, good questions. I like the detail of those. So, um, I would say there are a couple different ways you could do this. You could put your phone in the next room and have the alarm be on your phone so that it's loud enough to wake you up if you depend on the alarm. The other alternative is to have like an old-fashioned alarm clock, but turned around and then across the room so that it's just like I would shy away from having something that has a clock or the ability to see time right next to your bedstand. Some people will put a towel over it or whatever, but like I don't like I'm too tempted. If it's an arm's reach, I'm going to grab it. I'm going to, use my arms to like turn it around and look. So you can reduce that temptation by having it across the room. So
So in the event that I need to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, so I tend to use my phone as the flashlight. So clearly I'd be seeing the time, right? Would you recommend someone having like a dim, smaller flashlight to kind of navigate their way to the bathroom?
yeah, I have a little red light flashlight that's on my bedside that I grab if I need to use the restroom at night. So just have that right handy next to you, so that you can see. Because sometimes people will they'll go into the bathroom, they'll turn the bright light on, and that's just like this big blast of light, which gets their brain a little bit too fired up. So anything you can do to kind of reduce those lights in transit is good.
Okay, interesting. All right, so some other things I'm going to throw out to you. So I tend to keep my bedroom temperature around 65-ish degrees, so I know that it's optimal temperature. I am I sleep with a weighted blanket, so that's been a little bit helpful. Pitch black, like as black as it can possibly be. The only reason why I would even need a flashlight is because I have three little kids, and sometimes they'll randomly throw stuff on the ground, and I don't want to trip on it.
Right. Yeah.
And people that are listening, obviously they can't see this, but here are my sleep supplements that you can see right here, right? So I'm not going to list all these out because I don't want people to think, oh, I should go buy this. But as you can see here, it's a bunch, right? So I'm taking a ton of supplements to try to stay asleep. Do you think that there's been a tolerance built with these that could be affecting my sleep in a negative way?
Possibly. I'm not like a super big proponent of sleep supplements, in terms of like their efficacy. It seems to be a little bit spotty. There's not a lot of really solid data about them. Some have data that are a little bit stronger than others. Um, but it may be interesting for you if you're willing to try it, is to just go without supplements or reduce them, or one at a time might be a really good idea, because you held up a pretty big basket that had a few. So like maybe one at a time, because sometimes if you're taking multiple supplements like that, you don't know what's actually moving the needle, if any of them are. So that's just a thought
Yeah, that's
about
a good point.
supplements.
When I travel, I try to stay on East Coast time. So I'm an hour outside Philadelphia, and I do a lot of West Coast speaking engagements. So California, Washington State, Oregon. I mean, every time I'm in one of those states, I'll stay on East Coast time. Do you think that that's a good idea to try to keep my circadian rhythm intact as much as it can be?
Yeah, I think if you're traveling only that distance for a short period of time, it's just better to stay on your home time. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because for whatever reason, I sleep pretty good when I travel. I don't know if it's the psychology of I'm leaving my problems behind. I don't know what it is. And I tend to sleep in Courtyard by Marriott because I really like that hotel chain and I'm so used to that bed. What do you think that might be? That when I travel, I don't have as much difficulty sleeping. You would think that the opposite would be true,
Yeah.
no?
Well, sometimes like I think what you're spot on. I think sometimes you have like a reprieve from your problems. And that helps, your brain kind of calm down a little bit more, and you might be getting better sleep. Um, a lot of times when people travel, they report back that they have like a difficult first night, and that's actually a real thing called the first night effect. It's just we're wired that way because we have to like make sure our environment is safe to sleep in. So the first night you're somewhere new, your brain is sort of like, I'm in a new place. Am I safe? And that's why people often don't sleep well the first night. But it sounds like with the Courtyard Marriott, they've replicated the environment pretty well enough so that it seems like not a new place to you, maybe every time.
Yeah, I mean, you should see if you thought my sleep basket was intriguing, you should see my bag, right? Like, so I have everything set up just because of the sheer volume of travel, from having a specific clip that I can make sure the curtains stay a certain way so it's blacked out, to a sound machine, to like I do everything I possibly can to make sure that the hotel room is optimal for my sleep because I want to be energetic the next day, right? Because I have a sleep engagement the next day. I want to offer tremendous value to my clients. So it is interesting to me though, and I need to step back and try to process through that why when I travel, I'm getting good sleep, right? So I need to think about
Yeah.
that more. So speaking of thinking, you've given us a lot to think about today. I really appreciate this conversation. There are so many things that you said. I've never heard it quite in those terms before. There's three things in particular, three bullet points that I'm going to remember as takeaways. So the first thing that you said was you listed out a three-legged stool of sleep, essentially. You said behaviors towards sleep, circadian rhythm, and mindfulness. I think you mentioning that just speaks to the complexities of getting good sleep. So I really appreciate you mentioning that. The second point was the morning was really important. You said morning sunlight as soon as you get up. You recommended around 10 minutes. And then also don't wear sunglasses. I think that was really important. You mentioned anchor wake up time. Really
Yes.
important. And then also that exercise piece. I tend to exercise in the morning. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I really appreciate those three things that you laid out. And then the third and final piece that I've never heard before, but it makes sense. And it's interesting because this is the Stories with Traction podcast. You mentioned the story you're told your whole life regarding sleep is paramount. And I had to think about in my early 20s, this one sales manager really demeaning sleep and how that might still be having an effect on me today, decades later. So I really appreciate everything that you shared. If someone wants to get more information on what you do, they want to reach out to you for your services, where's the best place they can go to get that information?
You can just hop on my website, morganadamswellness.com. I've got that free guide about 3 a.m. wake ups and a link to schedule a consultation. So definitely, don't be a stranger.
Perfect. And I highly recommend downloading that. I'm literally looking through it right now. It's got a lot of gold in there, so highly recommend downloading that. I will include links in the show notes. People could just click and go from there. Thank you again, Morgan. Really appreciate your time today.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. If you found this discussion helpful, please leave a review since positive reviews help others find these conversations. New episodes drop regularly, so stay tuned. And remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to take action, you must share more stories.